Red Alert is a new and rather massive game by Richard Borg. Everybody mentioned the game to ask me, oh, is it related to the video game? And I'm like, I had no idea there was a video game, so I don't know that I can answer that. But I'm sure that a little simple Google search will help you solve that problem. Red Alert is a game by Richard Borg in the same system that we know from Commands and Colors. You know, the battlefield is divided in 3 areas and the action is card driven. You've seen that probably in Memoir 44, Commands and Colors Ancients, Napoleonics, Tricorn, in Abaddon. Let's see if I'm the only one who remembers that game, which is a game of sci-fi combat, but it is land sci-fi combat. Now we are in a sci-fi universe again with Red Alert Space Warfare, but we are in space, so we have large fleets of cruisers, battleships, destroyers, fighters, etc., moving around the battlefield and pretty much shooting at each other. There are also other objectives that you may want to accomplish based on the scenarios, but destruction is still going to be one of the main things that players will attempt to do. Let me show you how Red Alert works. The game is played on this large map. It is printed on cloth and it is the largest map that I've seen for any game of this kind, for any game in the Commands and Colors system. For scale, you look at that deck of cards, it's the same size as other cards in the game, but they look much smaller. By the way, this makes sense because the units are represented by those starships and they're just bigger than your traditional wooden block that you have in other games in the system. In fact, this is so big that it doesn't even fit entirely on my game table, and so we put it in such a way that still these X's are playable. We just put the units a little crammed there and the top half of the X, but it still works. So the map is divided in 3 sectors. It represents a generic area of space, and then you also have terrain features that you will place on the board using these tiles here. They're double-sided. They have asteroids on one side and planets and planetary system on the other side. You assemble these planetary systems a little bit like puzzles, so they occupy multiple axes, and as you can imagine, terrain feature will influence movement and combat. The game is played in scenarios with different configurations and victory objectives, and the game comes with a number of ready-made scenarios, and definitely you'll soon be able to create your own. Each player or each team controls a number of space units. Each unit is formed by 3 or 4 miniatures. 3 is the standard number, 4 is the heavy version of that group, and each unit also comes with a token that tells you about some of the capabilities of the unit. On top here, the number of hexes tells you the number of, hexes that the unit can move when it is activated. So this one would be 2. The fighters are light but fast and they can go up to 4. Then we have here at the bottom the number of dice that are rolled by that unit when fighting at different ranges. The first number all the way to the left is the number of dice that you roll when you're attacking an adjacent enemy, and then you have how many dice you roll to 1x, 2 x's away, that is 1 intervening x, 3 x's away, and so on and so forth. And you have larger ships that even go further. They have longer attacking range. Also, you see the shape in the background that tells you the kind of class that the unit belongs to. We have 3 classes. That is a strike class, the fighter class, and the capital ship class. And here I can give you a sense of what the miniatures look like. A special type of ship is the flagship because it has a single model and it comes with 3 escorting fighters, but fighters can also form their own unit. So at the beginning of the game, players will set up their units on opposite sides of the board, and then it is time to go. Players will alternate, taking turns. From time to time, you'll be able to use a resource to activate out of turn, but most of the action will be during your turn in an I go, you go kind of way. To perform actions in the game, you will use 3 types of resources. Command cards, if you know Commands and Colors games, you know how that works. Combat cards, that will enhance combat, and then Star Token, which are a very flexible resource that you can spend to perform a variety of things. You will have a hand of command cards, and also you will have some combat cards in your hand. The basic idea is that during your turn, you will play a command card. You will do what it says. Then you will perform actions based on that command card. You may have to resolve combat, which you may enhance with combat cards. And then at the end of your turn, you will draw a new command card, and then you will either draw a combat card and a start token, or you will take 2 start tokens instead. At the end of your turn is also when you can choose to discard previously drawn combat cards, and by discarding a card you get a start token. Players continue like this. This is the flow of the game until one of the 2 players meets the victory condition of the scenario. A common one is based on inflicting pain and destruction on the opponent. When a unit takes enough hits that all of the miniatures are removed, the unit is destroyed. The opponent takes the token, flips it to the other side, and the back of the token tells you the number of victory points that the unit is worth. Incidentally, for those that have played other games of this type in which the number of units influences the combat capability of the unit, this is not the case. The number of units, the number of miniatures in a hex simply represents, call them hit points, health points, life points. Pretty much this tells us that it takes 3 hits to destroy that unit. Now it takes only 2 hits. This is all that it does. The combat capabilities are on the token and are not influenced by the number of miniatures. Now, as for the command cards, many command cards will simply indicate a number of units and 1 or more sectors. Remember, we have left, center, and right sector, and also we have some X's that are in between and they count as belonging to both. If, for example, I play this card, then I can issue 1 order. Fancy way of saying I can activate up to 4 units in the center sector, which happens to be this one. Other cards will activate different combinations of sectors. As you can see, there are a lot of cards with special activations, and simply you do what the text says and you activate whatever it is that the card allows you to activate. Sometimes it's a specific type, a specific class of ship. Sometimes it is a configuration on the board, say units that are adjacent to one another, this sort of thing. When you activate a unit, you can move it, and then after you resolved or you completed all movements, you can resolve combat. Basically, you move with all of the units you want to move, and then you attack. Suppose we have this destroyer here, and we decide to move it 1, 2, because we are trying to attack that enemy unit. Suppose we had also activated this cruiser here. I want to move a little closer, but I don't need, and I could move adjacent to the enemy. But why would I? Since I roll 3 dice when I'm adjacent, or when I am 1 hex, with a 1 intervening hex. Other units have different ranges and different number of dice, and that will lead to different strategies. Incidentally, that was just an example to show you how different units will want to fire different distances, but I'm still going to move adjacent there because I want to show you combat, what happens when you are range, when you perform range combat, or when you perform melee combat, basically close quarters combat. To fight. You declare an attack with 1 of your active units, and then you will roll a number of these custom dice. They have 3 symbols representing the 3 classes of ships. So the fighter, the battleship, the capital ship, and the strike class. Then we have 3 other symbols. The start tokens, these are the simplest ones. When you roll that, you draw a start token. A blast, which is usually a hit with some exceptions. There are some classes that ignore blasts from other classes. So for example, with a capital ship it's hard to hit a small fighter, but then also with a small fighter it's hard to inflict the damage on a heavy ship. And then we had the red alert. In other commands and colors game, this would be the retreat. Usually that means that if your ship took damage and a red alert was rolled against that ship, the ship has to retreat. However, if you only had one red alert, you can immediately spend 2 star tokens to ignore that effect. If you have more than one red alert, you cannot remove it. You cannot cancel those right away. The number of dice that you roll may be modified by a number of things, so say, again, not just range, but card effects and other things. Once you have the number of dice you roll, and you inflict a hit on the opponent, for each die that you roll that matches the type of opponent, say I'm firing against them, and then is purple square versus purple square, that would be a hit. And again, as you can see, there are other ways of hitting too. For each hit that you inflict, you will remove a miniature, a figure belonging to the opponent. And now, if you're firing adjacent, you're attacking from an adjacent position. After the attack, if the enemy is still there, so we're enforced to retreat and we're eliminated, then the enemy can choose to spend star tokens to battle back against something you have in other commands and colors games, sometimes without having to spend resources, but here's how it works. You will spend those star tokens and then you will roll dice and attack as normal. You can also spend star tokens to enhance movement, but this is pretty much the basic idea. Again, combat cards will give you a variety of effects, but pretty much this is almost most of the rules, really. There is one interesting thing though. If you have red alert symbols and you were unable to remove them with star symbols, or you somehow decided not to, then you have to retreat. And it's not just that. This is important. After you retreat because of a red alert effect, then you also get a red alert marker, and the unit that has that marker now cannot move and will fight with 1 fewer dice. However, we almost never see the situation because there are many ways of getting star tokens. You get them from the dice, you get them at the end of the turn, and this penalty is just so dire that it's almost by default that when we see a red alert, it simply means you're going to spend star tokens. I still haven't seen a player that has star tokens and decided not to spend them and keep a red alert. So this is pretty much how it works, back and forth on the two sides until one player has achieved the victory conditions of the scenario. Commands and Colors games are in general very good. An average Command and Color game is usually better than a lot of other games. Red Alert in that sense is good, but within the Commands and Colors, Battle Lore, R44 family, I find it to be fairly weak entry. Again, it doesn't mean it's bad, it means that if I feel like playing that system, there are just other games that are more flavorful, more tactically satisfying. Although, from the point of view of the components, this is probably gonna be the favorite game for some of you, for those that have a toy-heavy approach to gaming. Previous games in the system tend to use, a lot of those use wooden blocks. Yeah, there are some with plastic miniatures. And I have to say, component-wise, this game is majestic because you have this large board, these large fleets that maneuver around. It's really, really impressive, really appealing. Of course, also because of that, it takes quite a while to set up and put back in the box, but that is what you can expect when the production is so massive. And this is just the base set. There are also expansions with more types of units. As for gameplay, nothing wrong with it. Again, it is just that it will be naturally compared to many siblings that were there before that are so much stronger. You find all the things that you like in other Commands and Colors system, the hand management problem, the challenges that come from the fact that you do not know exactly what you're going to be able to activate soon, and so you're trying to manipulate the battlefield, not just in terms of how you can hit the opponent or avoid getting hit, but also on spreading your units in a way that you can then activate them. Maybe you move them from one sector to the other because you're going to activate that sector next time, and at the end of that move you try to keep them in between two sectors to delay the moment in which you commit. So that stuff is fun. Finding the right position to attack the enemy, rolling these buckets of custom dice, and also the battle back option is something that I like very much. We've seen it before. And I also like a lot the idea of the star tokens, so that flexible resource that lets you do a lot of different things. Or does it? That is, on one hand, I was like so excited. This was a system an idea that seemed to promise so much tactical depth. In truth, there are just some actions that are so much better than a lot of other ones that they almost become a default. I rarely felt that there was a real dilemma. 5 excellent things that I wanted to do with the star tokens, and I didn't know how to get there. Rather, if I can battle back, I'm gonna battle back in almost every case. If I can remove a red alert, I will, because the consequences are so dire otherwise. And you get a lot of star tokens, and so basically it's almost by default. The things that you do with the star tokens, I didn't think that they really added a lot of complexity. If anything else, because so many times you'll be able to not just remove the red alert token, but to prevent it, that is, to prevent a red alert retreat, then you also don't have many retreats like you have in other games. Maybe this makes sense in Napoleonics while the infantry is moving back. Here, I guess you can imagine the starships regrouping. But although it makes sense that the starships take their hit and then they stay where they are, they're not physically pushed back. Then tactically, the battlefield feels more static because you don't have that element of rearranging the battlefield, having to deal with your formations being disrupted, which is something that is really, really fun in other in Commands and Colors games. The terrain, you have terrain features here in this base set, but not as many, and they're not as interesting or not as intriguing as you have in other Commands and Colors games. I don't know that you could, given the setting, because we're in space, but still, in other games you have them and you are working around the terrain features, and here not so much. Other than this, it's good. It just feels a little more generic, a little, and therefore it has less flavor. It has less flavor to me than other Commands and Colors games. It feels, in a sense, easier to play because you don't have to worry about retreats. Although again, it seems like you have more rules because of the star tokens. Pretty much you get a lot of those. You'll spend them every time that you have an opportunity. It almost feels like the game could have been simplified by telling us ignore a red alert result or things like that. So it plays well. It works. It just doesn't shine as much as other games in the system. There are some of you that will buy just because of the miniatures. Also, I don't paint miniatures, but probably those that do will want to do so, just to be able to differentiate the units on the board a little more easily. There were times where at first I was trying to figure out, is it a destroyer or a cruiser? Then I would have to look at the token. And in a sense, I also thought, well, but I could just play the game with the tokens. Of course, the experience would be different, but the toys are here for those who like them. To me, they are nice looking, but never one of the main attractives when I play a game. So Space Alert, it looks great, it has amazing components, it plays well, but it is not the strongest game in the Commands and Colors family.